Alright, so now that we are done talking about the potential ban of TikTok in the US, again on another piece of political news here. Yeah, Pritam Singh being charged for allegedly lying to parliament. Right, so just some context here, okay. Obviously Mr. Pritam Singh, he's the leader of the opposition, right? In Singapore. So what that means is, well, exactly as the title sounds, he's the leader of the opposition. So, yeah, and here's what's happened. All right, he was charged on Tuesday, March 19, so a couple of days ago, by because he allegedly lied to a parliamentary committee, which, if I recall, it was headed up by Mr. Edwin Tong, was it? I think it was. Yeah, just let me fact check that. Yeah, it was. All right. Now, what is this issue all about then? Right. So he allegedly lied to a parliamentary committee, in relation to the Raeesah Khan issue. Okay. So, a quick refresher, I guess, for students who may be watching this, or for anyone who may be unaware of what actually occurred. Okay, CNA did an excellent timeline article here. All right. Actually, okay, there we go. Yeah. CNA did an excellent article. Sort of like laying out the timeline here. Okay. Yeah. So short of it was that this woman here, Miss Raeesah Khan, right? She was previously an elected MP, under the Workers' Party. So she was elected in 2020, all right. And if I'm not wrong, she was previously part of either the yes, there we go. She was an MP for Sengkang GRC, right? So this was essentially the Workers' Party's first victory in Sengkang in a while, right? Or it could be their very first one. I'm not too sure. Do fact check that, right? But yeah, it was a significant move forward for the opposition party at that point of time, because essentially they're garnering more votes, and that gives them a greater sort of like platform to eventually, contest, all the PAP stuff in parliament, right? And as you can see here on August 3rd, 2021, so for the students who may be watching, or rather for the students who are taking A levels this year, right, in 2024, sorry, and for JC1 students, right, those who just entered junior college, you may have forgotten about this because it's understandable. 3 years ago, y'all were simply 13 years old, I think, or even 14 years old. So it is an age where we may not necessarily read the news, right? So I think this is a good refresher for you. She gave a speech in parliament on empowering women, which is great, okay? Because why Raeesah Khan received so much support in the first place was because she ran on a more progressive platform, okay? And yeah, so as you can see here, she talked about accompanying an SA survivor to the police station 3 years prior. So prior to the speech, so that would have been 2018, I guess. Yeah, 2018, right? And she said that the woman was crying after making her police report because the police allegedly had made comments about her dressing and pointed out that she was drinking, and the insinuation, right, being that the authorities, the police, essentially, how do I put this delicately? They were victim blaming. That's what she was insinuating, and that they did not want to sort of like take the action to investigate the matter, right? So the implication is not only that the police were victim blaming, they were also supporting or rather pushing back against, you know, a woman's right to sort of like point out, you know, or to make reports on any sort of injustices that she faced, or this kind of threats against her own safety and all that. If this were true, okay, if this were true, it would have caused a massive shitstorm in Singapore. But as it turned out, when the authorities decided to investigate further, it turned out that she was lying. Okay? It turned out that she was lying, right? So she herself, by her own admission, had pointed out that she was lying. As a result, that's why you do not see her at the Sengkang GRC nowadays. She has since resigned. But the issue, apparently, you know, I'm not going to go through the whole timeline here, you know, with all the facts. You can read it for yourself. She admitted it, apparently, to the leaders of the WP, which included, you know, Mr. Pritam Singh, Miss Sylvia Lim, and Mr. Faisal Manak, right here. Okay, and that she had admitted that she had lied in her testimony. Okay, and so Mr. Pritam Singh was called in, you know, to a committee of privileges, right, in relation to this case, and he was grilled upon it by Mr. Edwin Tong, right? Now, as a result of this, okay, Mr. Pritam Singh is now, in the year 2024, he was called in for questioning, I think, in 2022 or 2021. I can't remember which year. I remember watching the videos though. He's currently being charged for it. Okay, so how do I put this nicely? Okay, so the thing is that when such issues occur, right, and of course, you know, if you go and read up on things related to gender inequality and all that, there are a lot of cases whereby, you know, victims of SA and all that find it difficult to go and report, right? And it isn't just here or any other countries, it's a worldwide thing, simply because of, you know, fears of retaliation or fears of, you know, being branded a liar, right? Because and again, I'm in no way suggesting that Singapore is an unsafe place to report all these issues, but the main point I'm trying to make is that it is not so simple an issue, and obviously I cannot, or rather I shouldn't be the one who sort of talk more about this. I mean, because I'm not a woman, right? And I'm certainly in no place to say this, but from what I've read and from some of the, you know, stories that I've heard, these are just some of the difficulties that were sounded off by victims of SA, right? And yeah, you know, so often, and you have seen this portrayed in the media, so like fictional media, you know, there's this one great episode by Brooklyn Nine-Nine that really tackled this issue head on, and of course in real life cases as well. It often, and certainly this is unfair, but it often boils down to a he said she said kind of situation, right, when it comes to reporting on all this SA. So as I said earlier, if the story of what Raeesah Khan said was true, then certainly it points to a deeper sort of problem, ongoing problem in our society as a whole, right, when it comes to the protection of victims of SA and all that. But you see, in doing this, right, I'm not analyzing the impacts of, you know, the fact that Mr. Pritam Singh was charged, you know, at this time, right? I'm not talking about that. I mean, certainly there are political impacts there, right, which you can read on your own on the copious amounts of commentaries that have since gone up on CNA, right? Legal experts, political analysts coming out and saying, hey, what are the implications then for the opposition party in Singapore, right? And PAP themselves have come out and said that they will not suspend, Pritam Singh from all his parliamentary duties and all that. So he himself has also said that he has pled not guilty to the charges, and he said he has engaged a lawyer and he's fighting for he's fighting in a court of law lah, right, when it comes to this issue. So we're not going to talk about that too much, but instead we're going to talk more about the impacts of Raeesah Khan's actions. Now, to be clear, as I said earlier, it is very difficult for all these things to be properly reported upon because it's just the nature of the harassment and crimes and all that in itself, right? But in doing such actions, okay, whether or not it's actually happening, right, the potential outcomes of Raeesah Khan's lies here are a couple of things. Number one, the progressive movement in Singapore is going to take a hit in terms of its credibility. So what am I talking about in terms of the progressive movement in Singapore? So it's related to the political spectrum, right? How we see the world, how we view certain issues, how we come to an assessment of whether or not certain policies would be best for the nation as a whole is partly influenced by our sort of political leanings, I guess. Okay, so I've already explained this in our culture war video. Please go and check that out. But typically in Singapore, the majority political leaning will be conservative, right? Conservative. And obviously, we don't want to just box people into their political leanings or ideologies, because number one, it's not fair to them. Number two, things are never that simple, right? So, for instance, a person may be conservative in terms of family matters. So maybe disapproving of things like divorce, right? Disapproving of a wedlock kind of situation. They may be against that, and certainly that speaks of a more conservative leaning. But on other issues, maybe they may feel that, hey, there should be more robust government measures to help those in need, right? And that's a more progressive sort of mindset. And so often, right, it is difficult to simply pigeonhole people into whatever specific political leanings or ideologies that they may have. But for progressives in Singapore, so people who tend to want to support greater governmental measures for the poor, and not to say that the conservative government does not, they do, right? And that in itself is a very progressive kind of policy. And in fact, PAP was considered progressive when they first rose up in the 1950s, okay? And things like advocating for more women's rights in this particular case, and women empowerment, right? And other sorts of progressive kinds of policies or mindsets, like let's say related to the mindsets related to the LGBTQ community, for instance, okay? These people, right, and I consider myself one of them, the progressives, they are going to, her actions would hurt the reputation of this movement. And it did, right? Because and again, I'm not suggesting that Singaporeans are lacking that much of a nuance, although if you go and once again, if you go and watch all the CNA videos and look at the comments, you just get a brain aneurysm there. But yeah, it doesn't help the case of progressives in Singapore. It really doesn't, right? Because some inevitably there'll be some trolls out there. Okay, and once again, I'm not suggesting that Singaporeans, the majority of Singaporeans behave in this way, but there may be trolls out there who may say, hey, so why should I believe women? Right? Because history has proven you have a case of like Raeesah Khan, a woman claiming to be for women empowerment, coming out and lying about all these things to achieve her objective. And in such scenarios, there's nothing that we really can say to rebut except that that is an exceptional case, right? Because obviously most people with one iota of logic wouldn't do things like that. And certainly considering the public platform that she had, and she was voted in, mind you, right? So all the more the responsibility is greater, right? Yeah, that shouldn't happen. And yeah, so that's the main impact here. That's the main takeaway here, right? The progressives would eventually get sort of lose their legitimacy or credibility. Some women may be affected, right? Some. And again, I'm not saying that all of them will. Some, right? And of course, when it comes to cases like this, it is a very, very delicate issue, So, in terms of the political impact, you are seeing it right now, right? You are seeing it right now for the WP. Can you imagine, like, just the amount of, stress and the amount of, I guess, things that the opposition party has to deal with just because one of their elected MPs decided to go out there and lie, right? And how would that affect the optics of their political party as a whole, right? Because if the logic is very simple, okay? If an employee is discovered to have done something that may be criminal or whatever, inevitably their actions will affect the reputation of the company, right? Inevitably. So if we look at the global context nowadays, one I guess prominent example would be what's happening in WWE right now. Okay, to draw a parallel here, because there was this whole allegations that came out against Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis, I think, the previous head of talent relations in WWE, and the story is just disgusting, and the sex trafficking allegations and all that. Of course, it has not been proven in a court of law yet. For now, these are still allegations, but look at the fallout, right, and the impact that's happening on the company as a whole. So people like Paul Levesque, so Triple H, and his wife Stephanie are inevitably implicated because of this. So much so that they had to get The Rock back, as a member of the board and all that, right? The same thing applies here, and all the more so in the context of a political party that is claiming, right? And again, this applies to all political parties. It doesn't matter whether it's PAP or WP or whatever. It applies to a case whereby a political party is claiming to be representative of the people's interests. That means they will do their best to fight for the welfare and the betterment of the citizens' lives. Okay, by being honest, upstanding politicians who would walk the grounds, work the grassroots, get to know the people's needs and all that, and of course bring that into the legislative bodies, right? So parliament in the case of Singapore. And as a result, WP's reputation was affected, right? Why is it suddenly brought up again this year at this time? We are not gonna speculate, right? Except perhaps it's a case of the legal proceedings, but like the legal proceedings taking that long, that is certainly the main reason, but yeah, it's just disappointing as a whole, because I remember when the WP won, and I'm not saying that I'm a card-carrying WP supporter, right? And I've said this, I've declared my political position in previous videos. I am not a partisan. I am leaning towards good policy. Whichever party that comes up with sensible, logical policy, okay, that would help Singaporeans more, right, which would better our lives, which make lives more equitable for all of us, and ensure that the citizens' dreams and happiness and all that are fulfilled. Sounds cheesy, I know, but that's precisely the government's job, right? Because they're voted in, and the ministers are paid obscene amounts of money every year, right? And again, I'm not saying that is wrong, although based on my tone, you can already more or less tell. But nevertheless, right, if the government is doing a good job to protect the people and to ensure that their interests are fulfilled, then that's where my vote goes, right? So when she was voted in 2020, it was kind of refreshing in a way, because should I talk about this? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's not gonna do much harm, so I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Because you have a progressive voice being voted into parliament, and one that is, getting stronger over time, right? And for me personally, I won't go into the details, but I have, in terms of my worldview, right, I experienced quite a bit of, and as with many others, I surmise, right, the pandemic brought a lot of perspective into my own life, and that was when I really discovered my own political identity in that sense, right? Because due to details that I wouldn't get into, right? For me personally, I was still struggling to find myself in more ways than one, right? That's why at the ripe young age of 31 years old, I'm out here trying to, finally make something of myself here, when it should have occurred 10 years earlier, right? But hey, we all take different paths in life, right? Yeah, so it was just sort of like more hopeful, for me personally at that point of time, to find people who represented my own views, okay, being voted into government. And then this shit happens. Yeah, so that's the main fallout, I guess. As again, I'm not trying to say that my own experiences are representative of the progressives in Singapore's experiences, right? But what she did, no matter how you put it, was wrong. What she did was wrong. And I guess this is a good lesson to take away for especially for young impressionable students who may be watching this. Your actions have consequences. All right, you may not discover it, you may not feel it, you may not feel the fallout of it, but the Spider-Man saying, with great power comes great responsibility. This is precisely why you shouldn't abuse your privilege, and I call it a privilege because you are voted in and you are chosen by the people to represent them, right? You shouldn't be abusing your privilege like that. And I guess, obviously, since this is still a developing story, right, we'll have to see where this goes. What I would say though is that the biggest impact of this would be, would be seen, or at least, the biggest indications, or I should say the biggest indications of how the people view this whole fiasco since 2021, the impacts of it will be seen in the next elections. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So now, of course, how do we use this as an example? Okay, if we look at this question here, all right, funnily enough, you can use it here, right? You can use it here, although except I should make it clear, if the question were to be politicians, then you can use it. If it's nations, don't use it, all right? So yeah, if that's the question, then you can use it in that sense. But this example, I guess, will be more useful for your application questions, especially if the questions are touching on really, really weird topics like, they are related to human experiences and behaviors. So for instance, the act of lying, right? Or the act of public speaking, or having that sort of public platform, okay? This will be a great example for that, right? And especially in the context of Singapore. So yeah, I guess that's the best way to use this particular example, right, in the context of all these political questions, specifically those that question the roles of governments and politicians in any society, right? So the main framework here would be that governments are expected, or not just governments, politicians are expected to be moral, upstanding, okay, and be taking care of the citizens' long-term and short-term interests and welfare. Based on that, Ms. Raeesah Khan failed to achieve that. And based on the verdict of, Mr. Pritam Singh's thing, is if he is found guilty of lying to Parliament in the course of their investigations into this case, then he has failed that as well. All right. But for now, again, this is still a developing story. I would recommend that you follow the story for more details. So yeah, so that'll be that for this week's episode. Heavy focus on politics this week, but again, most of our news are related to that, and I guess politics as a topic will always, in my opinion, come out for general paper in more ways than one. So yeah, yeah. So thanks for watching. All right, if you would like to ask us a question, you can submit a question using this link down here, okay? And of course, follow us on our socials, right? We post snippets of our podcast episodes on TikTok, although I don't know how long that's gonna last, depending on the news that we discussed. Also follow us on Instagram. That's where you get behind the scenes looks at our classes, how we conduct our lessons, our students, and the funny things that they do in class, right? And by funny, I mean positive funny, okay? And of course, if you are looking for more help, in your O-levels or A-levels journey, right, for the subjects of English language, general paper, and H2 history, please contact us, right, using the contact details that can be found on our website. Okay, so yeah, you can see our website link there. All right, and submit a question using this last link here at https right / the discourseeducation.com.sg / discourse education podcast. All right, so discourse education podcast. All right, and yeah, we have also recently expanded into primary school tuition. All right, teaching young kids English. It's a challenge for me, cause I don't know how to handle kids, but it's great for personal growth. And yeah, if you are looking for a tuition on those subjects, please feel free to contact us anytime. All right. So with that down, and yeah, thanks for watching today, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.